This is the Education Gadfly Show.
Welcome to the Education Gadfly Show. I'm Stephanie Disler, here to kick things off for this week's episode. Today, Mike's back for another solo episode to talk about artificial intelligence, not how to use it in classrooms, but what its rise means for what we teach our kids as AI transforms work, democracy, and even human flourishing. Then, on the Research Minute, David shares a study linking the surge in child labor violations to falling school attendance, especially among Black youth and those living on farms. All this and more on the Education Gadfly Show, starting now.
Hello, this is your host, Mike Petrilli of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, here at the Education Gadfly Show and online at fordhaminstitute.org. Today, I am back for another solo episode. I am taping this on Monday morning before heading down to New Orleans for JebFest, the Excel in Ed annual summit. Hope that I might be seeing a bunch of you there. Actually, by the time this comes out, I will have been there and back. So I hope we got to hang out and chat. Today, I want to talk about AI. Let's do that on Ed Reform Update. All right, so AI, artificial intelligence, not A1, as Secretary Linda McMahon accidentally called it a few months back, but AI. And look, I really don't want to spend too much time today talking about the question of how AI might change schools or be used in the classroom. That's a big topic. I will say that I'm feeling pretty skeptical about it right now, maybe because I'm showing my age as a Gen Xer, but also because, as far as I can tell as a parent, the primary use case for AI so far is to allow cheating at massive scale, which is what all indications are happening, certainly in college, certainly in high school, middle school, I don't know, maybe elementary school. I think we should just go ahead and call it Cheat GPT instead of Chat GPT. It's crazy to think about the amount of energy and water being used so that high schoolers can cheat on their essays. Look, and any teacher that is still assigning an essay to be done at home or outside of class, I mean, they're just kidding themselves, right? And look, as a parent, if your kid has a teacher that is still doing that, that is pretending that AI does not exist and that they don't have to change everything about the way they make assignments, you should complain to your principal or school board. School districts should have policies that make it very clear that any work where we need kids to put in effort, again, especially writing, but other assignments too, it's got to be done now at school, in class, probably paper and pencil, bring back the blue books or super duper lockdown devices. Although, the New York Times has run a couple of great pieces in the last few days, one on the news side, another by Jean Twenge on the opinion side, talking about how devices are everywhere now. And we keep hearing these anecdotes, at least, that they are not locked down. I mean, kids are doing all kinds of crazy things. Some of them may be harmless things, just not focusing, but watching stupid videos, to things that are very much harmful, watching porn, doing sports gambling, playing poker while they are in school. So this is a problem. And look, I hear those of you who are techno optimists, but I'm with Andy Smerrick right now. I think we need a ban on the use of AI, at least for instruction for now, until we figure this thing out. Bah humbug. Okay, but that's not really what I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about today is what the advent of artificial intelligence implies for what we should be teaching our kids, given how dramatically it might change the future of work, our democracy, human flourishing, and in particular, how should the coming transformations translate into changes in the K-12 curriculum, and especially course requirements in high schools. Now, look, the course requirements in high school thing, I should admit, I've been obsessed with this long before AI was here, thinking that there's a lot wrong with those course requirements today. So AI just adds another argument to this. Now, this isn't new. I think some of us can remember debates way back in the 80s and 90s about what it meant that we were transitioning to a knowledge economy in terms of what students should know and be able to do. That was a big reason we had the push for college for all or college prep for all, which we now realize was misguided. But the notion was, oh my gosh, a lot of those manufacturing jobs are going away, jobs that that take a strong back. Instead, you need to use your brains. We're going to need to change the way we educate all kids for that. Well, now we look ahead into our crystal ball, and it certainly seems likely that the AI economy could be very different, could have a particularly large impact on a lot of the white collar jobs. And so that may mean that we need to change what we teach to kids. Certainly, colleges need to worry about this as they're preparing students for various white collar professional jobs right away. But we might need to think about this in K-12 also. Now, the trick is that nobody knows exactly what AI era education should entail because we really don't know what's going to happen to the economy. A lot of speculation right now. There's been a couple of interesting articles and studies coming out recently showing that experts have a terrible track record at predicting what is going to happen to the labor market, predicting which jobs are going to disappear. Basically, if you just track on a straight line what's happening with job trends and just follow those trends to their likely conclusion, that's the best prediction versus anybody trying to bring additional analytical expertise to the question. And that tends to happen slowly. We think it's all going to happen overnight. And of course, there's all these studies about how young people, 22, 23-year-olds today are already having a hard time finding jobs because of AI. We're not 100% sure whether that is actually the case. There will be changes, but they will probably happen relatively slowly. We'll see them coming. But again, we don't know for sure. What I think we need, though, in my opinion, is a process, a public engagement experience, something led by state policymakers to figure out as best we can what high school graduation requirements should be now in this AI era, and at least for the next, say, 5 to 10 years. Now, I'm focusing on high schools and graduation requirements for several reasons. And again, as I acknowledged earlier, I'm obsessed with them. But first, because of the logic of standards-based reform, we know we should start with the end in mind, right? What should students know and be able to do by the end of their K-12 experience? That means by the end of 12th grade. Then we can back map down to middle school, to elementary school, and figure out, what that implies for the earlier grades. The second is I doubt in the end that we're going to find that elementary schools and middle schools actually need to change all that much in terms of what they are doing and teaching to students. I think no matter what happens with AI, we're always going to want all children to learn how to get along with their classmates. Of course, that's key in kindergarten and beyond. How to read, write, and do arithmetic, how to explore the wonders of the world and everything that came before them. In other words, provide them their heritage in terms of history, science, literature, and the arts. This is the core of what, at least I think, elementary schools and middle schools should be doing, what it means to, say, get an 8th grade education. I don't think that's going to change a lot. I don't think we need to teach kids how to use AI because I think they're going to be way ahead of us on that front as well. And then third, I keep coming back to this, even before AI, it was clear that our high school graduation requirements had become a mess. On the one hand, they're way too lax. We're not serious about actually holding kids to any kind of standard. You look at the credit recovery programs that are out there. You look at the way that some states are now using career tech as an escape route for kids who can't read or do math, but to give them a diploma anyways. But then on the other hand, we still do have a lot of course requirements on the books. And in my view, it makes it very hard for students to have the time in their schedules to do things like apprenticeships, right? Work-based learning of various sorts. Even just to spend, say, most of junior and senior year doing career tech kinds of things, like is very common in other parts of the world, because they're still working away at all those course requirements that they've got. And we have this challenge that it's way too easy for state and local policymakers to add new course requirements, and they never seem to take them away. Right? I saw this with my own kids a few years ago in Maryland. Somebody decided that they shouldn't just have to take a semester of health, they should take a full year of health. And so now they take a full year of health, clogging up their schedules. And, look, if they were learning new material, there was a lot to cover, but it's the same content that they've been getting since sixth grade. Hit them over the head over and over and over again with the same stuff. And now it's for 2 semesters instead of 1 in high school. Why? Because some random state senator thought that was a good idea, right? And so we see this time and again. Of course, there's advocacy groups out there. There was, code.org saying that all kids should have to take a coding course, right? You've got people pushing for financial literacy classes. Of course, the longstanding requirements from foreign language, or the push after a nation at risk to get every kid, taking 4 years of English and 4 years of math, so on and so forth. Look, they all might be valuable, maybe, but when you add them up, it means that basically we're making everybody do what is in effect a college prep curriculum, and it doesn't allow for much time for other things. Oh, and by the way, people are also worried that teenagers aren't getting enough sleep, but it's really hard to change the schedules if you're still trying to pack in, 7 or 8 courses at a time. So I think we should call Marie Kondo because it is time to declutter. That is my argument. And what I think we need is some kind of zero-based budgeting approach on high school course requirements. Meaning, can we start from scratch and really go one by one to every course requirement and make sure it still makes sense? The idea of zero-based budgeting first came from the private industry and then was later picked up by reform-minded policymakers, famously including President Jimmy Carter way back in the 70s. And the idea is that rather than assume that the next year's budget should be pretty much the same, maybe a little bit higher than this year's, which is how a lot of organizations, certainly governments, tend to operate, the insight was, hey, it is important to start fresh, at least every once in a while, go line by line and see if any of the budget items had outlived their usefulness, right? To really get strategic about it. And I think we need something like that for high school courses to force the issue, because otherwise we're going to continue to be in the same dynamic where we just keep adding the requirements instead of ever taking them back. Okay. I mean, the last time we really did an overhaul was arguably in the 80s after A Nation at Risk, or maybe in the 90s when there was all this push for the 4x4 curriculum and other things that were all about, getting everybody to do college prep curriculum, at least do that as the default. It's been a long time. So I say, look, states should lead the effort, maybe launch a commission to do this, and to go course by course and determine whether the course requirements still make sense. And what are they looking for? I mean, ideally, we could look for evidence that the requirements actually make an impact in terms of student learning, right? I mean, is 4 years of math better than 3 years of math? Well, it probably depends on what the content is. And if did we just spread out the content before from 3 to 4 and it's the same stuff? Maybe not, but maybe there are certain things like Algebra 2 that really matter in terms of kids going both to college and to career technical training. Let's look at the evidence on that sort of thing. Okay, so they should examine that evidence about what impact it has on learning, on success in college, success in career training, in the labor market, right? Then the AI question, right? Is there anything about the course that it seems pretty obvious at this point is going to be less important in the AI era? And then finally, are there other ways for students to learn some of this knowledge and skills, especially through extracurriculars? Can you at least have a policy? Some states have this, or in a lot of cases at the district level, where you can substitute out, some requirements with extracurricular activities. So, let's take some examples. Coding for all. I mean, look, I've been skeptical of this all along, especially the all part, right? Do we really need that anymore? Everybody's saying that AI is just wiping out the entry-level coding jobs. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's an argument for it that in certain fields, STEM fields, maybe you still want students to learn the basic coding skills. But certainly we don't need everybody to learn it. And if you do want to learn it, look, use AP Computer Science or some of the other courses out there. The other big one is foreign language. Now, people hate it when I mention this, but I got to say, Does it still make sense for us to mandate that all kids take foreign language? It would be different, in my opinion, if we were any good at teaching foreign language, but we're terrible at it. You look at the percentage of Americans who speak a foreign language who did not grow up speaking that foreign language, it's infinitesimal, right? And yet lots and lots of people took some foreign language in middle school or high school. To me, that means we're terrible at teaching it. It's arguably a big waste of time. And if we were really serious about it, we would start in kindergarten, like other countries do, right? But we're not serious about it. So maybe that's one that should go. Look, maybe not. Maybe there's an argument that, doing foreign language helps with language abilities in English as well, or that it's got some other benefits. Or maybe it should say, well, look, if for college going kids, it's still important. If colleges still want foreign languages, but they're going to have to face this question too. But we should have that debate. It's a lot of time and energy we're spending on something that may not be adding a whole lot of value. Again, like I said before, substituting out things. So, hey, if you're on a varsity sport, maybe you don't have to take a PE class as well. If you're doing orchestra, maybe that counts as your fine arts, right? If you're doing debate and it's a serious debate club, maybe you don't have to take the civics course. Again, free up time in students' schedules for sleep or to do things like career tech, right? And then for the real core subjects, math and English, science, social studies, can we figure out, is there any evidence about how much is enough to be successful in college, in career, and which kinds of course materials do they all really have to have? Now, the way I've envisioned it, states would set up these commissions, they would go do their work, they would come back, and then the legislature would have to be bound by an agreement that says they're either going to vote all of these requirements up or down, right? Instead of cherry picking, kind of like the way military base commissions have worked in the past, where you have a slate and it's either yes or no. Maybe it's the State Board of Education in some cases that do this, but to really try to make it likelier that, we protect the process against special interests coming in, the foreign language teachers trying to lobby to keep foreign language requirements alive, right? Or anybody else who might come in and fight this process to say we've got to do some tidying up. And maybe we have to do this now on a regular basis. Again, there's a lot we don't know about what AI is going to mean. So maybe states agree we're going to do this every 5 years, every 10 years. Maybe we'll know a lot more. So that's my proposal, zero-based budgeting approach at course requirements. Do it via state commissions, have a vote up or down, see if we can try to take away some of these course requirements that have outlived their usefulness. Allow high school students in particular to have the time to do some other things, maybe more interesting things, maybe more valuable things going forward. That is my proposal. I'd love to hear from you what you think about it. All right, everybody. Now it's time for everyone's favorite, David's Research Minute. David, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I just got to babble on about my favorite topic, trimming down on high school course requirements. And, it makes me think that you always accuse me of only being interested in education topics that track where my kids are in their educational trajectory. And yeah. I'm guilty as charged. That's true. I've totally given up on elementary schools and middle schools. They're way in the rearview mirror.
You know what comes after high school, Mike? College.
Yeah.
You gotta fix that too.
I think we're going to need to do more higher ed stuff here at Fordham. Absolutely.
I have some great ideas for pre-K studies that we can do, Mike.
Oh gosh, yes. Well, I don't know. They all fade out. Those impacts, they just fade. They fade. Come on.
It's true. I have to say though, I have some sympathy for you now that mine are moving through the system because there are some things you can only understand once you're a parent, right? I mean, it is challenging to understand some aspects of our education system until you've experienced it. So I guess we should have nothing but graybeards making the policy, huh?
Yeah. I've also thought that I would have been a much better teacher if I had been a parent first.
Yes, that's another totally unrealistic implication of raising children, right? Which is like, man, I was bad at that. So we can't wait till we can't have 65-year-old teachers, right?
Well, I mean, we do have a lot of 65-year-olds these days. So Yeah, I don't know. All right. Well, what you got for us on the research front today?
I have a very interesting study on a serious topic, Mike. The title of the study is Contemporary Child Labor and Declining School Attendance in the U.S. It is a new working paper from Lucy Sorensen, Melissa Lyon, Ji-Hung Byun, and Stephen Holt. Apologies to everybody. The research questions that they are investigating are: first, how have school attendance patterns and youth labor rates evolved over the past 2 decades? Second, what is the causal impact of local reliance on child labor intensive industries on school attendance? And finally, how are these effects distributed across subgroups defined by age, gender, race, etc., and so forth? Okay, to address these research questions, the authors use microdata from the American Community Survey. It's spanning 2005 to 2023 to measure employment and school attendance outcomes among children and youth ages 6 to 17. Their primary measure of local child labor demand is the share of local employment in industries with high rates of child labor law violations. So think, for example, your local Six Flags, basically, or a melon farm. So there are lots of they construct a list of these industries that basically have not a good track record on this front. To address the potential endogeneity of local labor market industry composition, they employ a shift share instrumental variables approach. I will spare our listeners the details. Basically, the idea is to use the relationship between national and local shifts in industries' employment shares to suss out the effects of those shifts. But I think in some ways, the most interesting part of the paper is trying to figure out what is child labor. There is no universal definition. The International Labor Organization defines it as mentally, physically, socially, or morally dangerous and harmful to children and or interferes with their schooling. So there's a fairly compelling intuition behind that, but we can see that, the line between child labor and, for example, high quality CTE or a good internship for a young person is kind of a little bit ragged and fuzzy. And consistent with that, prior empirical research on intensive youth employment consistently finds higher absenteeism, reduced academic performance, increased likelihood of school dropout, et cetera, and so forth. However, some prior research also suggests that after accounting for selection, employed youth engage in fewer delinquent behaviors, have higher employability later in life, consistent with potential benefits of modest youth employment, to carefully quote the authors. So where does existing U.S. law draw the line here? Well, most of our child labor law dates back to the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, which it is important to understand in at least some detail. It sets baseline restrictions on minor employment with a particular emphasis on age restrictions. It mostly relates to children under 16. Children aged 14 and above can work legally across industries. Those aged 12 and above can work in agricultural settings. Children of any age can work as child performers for family businesses, unless you're working in mining or manufacturing, and for businesses with annual sales under 500,000. Their minors are limited in the number of hours they can work, unless they're 16 or 17, in which case there are no limits. It does prohibit minors under 18 from working in hazardous non-agricultural industries and minors under 16 from working in hazardous agricultural occupations. Okay, so to get at the bad stuff, as mentioned previously, the authors focus on high violation industries. So these are industries where there are reported violations of those laws that I just described. They construct a list of 50 industries that incur a significant portion of all U.S. child labor violations. I've already mentioned some of them. Their key finding is that a 10 percentage point increase in the local share of employment in high violation industries leads to a 6.9 percentage point decrease in overall public school attendance, a 9.1% decline for children in poverty, a 20 percentage point decline among Black youth, and a 30 percentage point decline among youth living on farms. However, that same increase in high violation employment also increases private school or homeschool attendance by 5.8 percentage points. So combined with a 6.9 percentage point decrease in overall public school attendance, that suggests a 1.1 percentage point increase in the number of children dropping out of school altogether. However, as the authors note, it is also plausible that some of the children reported as attending homeschool might be doing so because their parents seek to remove external accountability systems and in doing so open up more time for their children's work. However, the largest impacts are among youth ages 16 to 17. Among this group, a 10 percentage point increase in child labor demand reduces public school attendance by about 8 percentage points. That said, the authors still find sizable decreases in public school attendance for younger ages. For example, they find a 7 percentage point decrease for kids in ages 6 to 13. Okay, so ultimately, the authors find that this sort of large decline in public school attendance is consistent with a dropout phenomenon. In contrast, the decline in public school enrollment for students ages 6 to 13 is almost fully offset by an increase in private school and homeschooling. We can debate what that means. The authors also estimate that the effects of child labor demand on the share of youth with any employment in the prior year, they estimate a 7.7 percentage point increase in the likelihood of any youth employment, essentially all of which happens in industries with high rates of child labor violations, even though they represent only 16% of all industries. The authors suggest three implications. First, state and federal policymakers could implement stronger and more consistent child labor laws. They note a number of loopholes as they define them or as they see them. Second, federal and state authorities could enhance child labor law enforcement through more funding or higher fines. Third, policymakers could expand educational support services in targeted ways, for example, by hiring social workers. So the bottom line is they think this is a plausible explanation for some of the decline in public school attendance and that has occurred in the last decade. And they see problematic patterns in the data.
Woo. Okay. Wow. That is sobering. And I guess that, I mean, and to be clear, they think this is bad, right?
They do.
Which, and it probably is. And I only say probably because there's a part of this that we've discussed here before that it is good for kids to be getting some work experience, right? So summer jobs, that's a good thing, right? Weekends, great. After school and at nights, well, maybe in moderation, right? And but what they're showing here is that there's clearly some of this bleeding over into the school time.
Yeah, I think there is an important distinction between industries that have high rates of reported violations and actual violations, right? In other words, there's some daylight there, right? And so I do think we have to be careful. And I also think, particularly for 16 and 17-year-olds, right? There's something irrational about worrying about youth employment when kids are 18, right? And then calling it child labor when the kids are 17. For me, the part that was troubling, right? And let's assume that their methods are working here, right? It's fairly convincing, or at least rigorous. Is that if there is some effect on homeschooling and private schooling for kids 6 to 13, right? To me, that's almost the more troubling finding. Even though these kids aren't officially dropping out of school, right? The implication is that an increase in, I don't know, in the amount of people who are engaged in, farming or, working at the fair or whatever is associated with an increase in homeschooling for 7-year-olds is kind of troubling. I don't know. Am I making too much of that?
Well, I mean, it's probably troubling, but I don't know. You picture out in the country, probably a lot of homeschool kids are helping out on the farm, And so, and we know that if you're doing homeschooling well, you can cover what you need to cover for second grade in a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours, right? Leaves plenty of time to be out there collecting the eggs and, milking the cows or whatever else. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, farms are such a tiny percentage of what people, American industry at this point. But So probably, but look, we are living in an era where a lot of us have work lives that are now much more, meshing with personal lives, right? I mean, the boundaries are not so clear. You have we've allowed this to happen in education too. You can do a lot of stuff online. You can get to the assignments. I don't know. I can just imagine a lot of young people making this decision to try to, leave high school a little bit early in the afternoon and go do some work instead. I guess I want to know, like, can probably that's bad for them, but do we know that for sure? I don't mean to be overly skeptical. It does sound bad. Okay, to be clear, this sounds bad, but there's a version of this that maybe is positive if it's about work-based learning, if it's about getting valuable skills, that may help people learn more going forward.
I guess where maybe I disagree is that I feel like, I mean, I actually agree that there is valuable learning to be had on the workplace, but shouldn't those programs be programs? In other words,
Well,
yeah, I mean, shouldn't they be
right.
things that the state has approved and said, yes, like this is something that, is good for kids, or at least is defensible for kids 1 day a week or 2 days a week, or in addition to the rest of their educational programming, right? Like, isn't there some rule? I mean, shouldn't the state be overseeing that when the kids are
Yeah.
in of
Yeah.
school age?
And by the way, it feels to me like there's a technological solution here too. I mean, not to get too freaky. I know we'll hear from our former colleague Adam Tyner that this sounds like Black Mirror, but I mean, wouldn't it be possible to see, cell phones moving regularly from, say, a high school to one of these workplaces that's had a lot of violations during the school day? I mean, that seems like data you could probably get that would tell school administrators, hey, I think we know where John is. He goes there every afternoon to, the chicken factory. I don't know.
Yeah, it just
Seems like this is something we could figure out a way to curtail.
Yeah, it seems to me that there is a role for regulation. Sorry to sound like the center left guy on the podcast, but shouldn't you have to, if a child is going to be spending a significant amount of time doing this sort of thing, shouldn't you have to report that and sort of be, I don't know, I mean,
Yeah.
at least theoretically in compliance with the number of hours and so forth. I don't know. It makes me uncomfortable to think that we're just sort of taking parents' word for it. Not that I don't love parents, but they're not. Sometimes they're under pressure too, right? And sometimes I don't know. Their interests are not necessarily aligned with the child's interests.
All right, we will leave it there. Thank you, David. That is an important one, and it did sound like a very impressive study as well in terms of methodology. But that is all the time we've got for this week. So until next week,
I'm David Griffith.
and I'm Mike Petrilli of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, signing off.
The Education Gadfly Show is a production of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, located in Washington, D.C. For more information, visit us online at fordhaminstitute.org.